Every Thursday, at the exact same mile marker, Blake passed a blue pickup, always parked, always empty. Until one day, it moved. He followed it. What he found wasn't a ghost story. It was a message that waited 40 years to be delivered. Would you have stopped? The sun dipped low behind the Arizona mountains, casting shadows across the blacktop. Blake Wilson, 62, leaned forward in his seat, eyes narrowing behind scratched lenses as mile marker 200 came into view. He slowed a little out of habit now. There, as always, was the same old blue Ford pickup, pulled halfway onto the gravel shoulder, facing west, hood angled slightly toward the setting sun. It never changed. Same rusted fenders, same cracked windshield, same stillness, like it had been parked mid-breath and forgotten by the world. Blake let the rumble of his rig fill the silence, but his fingers tapped the steering wheel with unease. He'd been driving this route from Yuma to Barstow for over 10 years, long enough to know when something didn't add up. A parked vehicle for a few days? Sure. Even a few weeks. But a year? Nobody else seemed to care. Other truckers tossed around rumors on the CB. Some claimed it belonged to a drifter who hiked into the hills. Others joked it was haunted. The ghost at 200. They called it. Blake didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in patterns, and this one wouldn't leave him alone. As he passed the pickup, his gaze flicked toward it out of instinct. Empty. Or at least it looked empty. Again. He didn't realize he'd held his breath until the truck disappeared in his rearview mirror. Back in the cab, the quiet settled around him like dust. He reached into the glove box and pulled out the faded photo. 4 men in desert camo, arms slung around each other, sand behind them and half smiles on their faces. He ran a finger across each one. Himself, Adam, Jason, Bobby. Gone, he muttered, folding the photo along the crease again. The next few days blurred together. Gas stations, loading docks, rest stops with weak coffee and stronger silences. Then came the next Wednesday. Same stretch of highway, same mile marker, same truck. Except, not this time. It wasn't there. Blake blinked, sat up straighter. He glanced at the clock. It was almost 7 p.m., right on schedule. But the gravel shoulder was empty. No taillights. No tires, just sunburned grass and tire ruts in the dirt where it should have been. He checked his mirrors, slowed down, craned his neck back. Nothing. Then, a quarter-mile ahead, a shimmer of movement. Dust. A blue pickup, battered and ghost-like in the fading light, pulling back onto the road. His grip tightened on the wheel. He didn't think. He turned on his signal, shifted down and followed. At first, it was just curiosity. Then instinct. Then something deeper. The kind of feeling that settled in your bones before your brain could catch up. He kept his distance, letting the truck lead. It didn't speed, didn't swerve, just drove west like it had somewhere to be. The tailgate rattled. One brake light was out. The left rearview mirror was taped in place with what looked like duct tape. Blake felt a shiver crawl up his back. That truck, that body style, that missing hubcap. He knew it, somewhere in the far back of his mind, buried beneath decades of diesel fumes and desert wind. He'd seen it before. The pickup veered onto a dirt road just past the state line. Blake hesitated, then followed, the gravel crackling under his tires. The road led to a ridge, not marked on any delivery map, then curved down into a valley with a cluster of trailers and a weather-worn building marked Cooper's Repair. The pickup rolled to a stop beside the shop. Its engine sputtered, then died. Blake parked his rig 100 feet away and killed the engine. Dust settled around them like mist. He stepped out, boots crunching on dry earth. The driver's door creaked open. A man stepped out, maybe late 60s, lean, wiry, with a deep-set face and sun-dark skin. His hair was long, pulled back into a gray ponytail. He wore a denim jacket over a white shirt, sleeves rolled, oil-stained jeans, work boots. They stood there, facing each other, windless and quiet. "You followed me," the man said, not surprised. Blake tilted his head. "Been watching that truck sit for over a year. Then today it moves." The man nodded slowly. "I was waiting." "For what?" The man studied him. His eyes were sharp. You don't remember me, do you? Blake squinted, searching that face, combing through the years. Something flickered. You were there, the man said, voice low. Camp Victory, 91. It hit Blake like a jolt. Jason, Cooper. Jason nodded once. Blake took a step back. I thought you left before the last deployment. Jason's expression didn't change. I stayed behind, but I carried something with me. For you. He turned, opened the truck's door again, and reached under the seat. When he turned back, he was holding a weathered envelope. It was sealed. On the front, in thick block letters, was Blake's full name. I couldn't bring myself to deliver it. Until now. Blake stared at it. His name. His hands. The sun sinking behind them. The silence didn't feel empty. It was like something forgotten had finally found its voice. The desert around them was quiet, save for the ticking of cooling engines. Blake stood frozen beside his rig, the wind lifting specks of sand across the dry lot like tiny ghosts. He stared at the envelope in Jason Cooper's hands. Military issue, thick paper gone soft at the edges. His name stared back at him in block letters. He didn't reach for it. Jason didn't push it into his hands either. He just held it, steady and patient, as if time hadn't passed, as if this moment had been waiting on the horizon for years. Blake cleared his throat. You said, Kuwait. Jason gave a faint nod. Camp Victory, Echo Platoon, 1991. Blake blinked slowly. The name Echo stirred something inside him, half memories baked under too many layers of time. He looked closer at Jason's face. The lines were deeper, the hair now gray, but the eyes hadn't changed. Damn, Blake whispered. Jason Cooper. Jason almost smiled. They stood in silence again, until Blake finally motioned toward the garage behind them. That yours? Jason turned. Yeah, took over after my uncle passed. Do what I can for the community. Blake glanced back at the envelope. So what is that, exactly? You've been parked out there for months. Waiting for what? Me? Jason hesitated, then nodded. I didn't know if you'd still run that route, but every Thursday, like clockwork, you'd drive by. I'd park there, wait, hoping one day you'd stop. Blake frowned. That truck. I recognized it. From the base. That was yours. It was Adam's, Jason said quietly. After he died, the army shipped it to his brother. His brother gave it to me when I came back stateside. Blake's throat tightened. Adam Flanders, squad leader, sharp, loyal, reckless in the way you had to be to lead. The one man Blake thought about more than he wanted to admit. Officially, Adam had gone missing during a desert recon, presumed Kia. But Blake had never been able to shake the feeling that the story didn't add up. Jason looked out toward the horizon. Adam gave me the envelope the day before he went out. Told me to give it to you if anything happened. I kept it, and then I didn't know how. You didn't know how to hand over a letter? Jason met his eyes. I saw what losing him did to you. I saw you close up, push everyone out. You left before the memorial. Before we even packed up. Blake's jaw tensed. You think I didn't want to stay? You think I didn't want answers? Jason folded his arms but didn't answer. They stood there, two old soldiers carrying decades of unfinished business, surrounded by rusted trucks and dry wind. Blake finally broke the tension. You got coffee in that place? Jason gave a small nod and turned toward the shop. Inside, the garage smelled of oil, dust, and metal. The office was small, papers stacked on filing cabinets, a cot in the corner, and a coffee pot that looked older than either of them. Jason poured 2 mugs and handed one to Blake. Blake took it without a word. His eyes drifted to the envelope again, now sitting on the desk between them. You never opened it? He asked. Jason shook his head. Wasn't mine to read. Blake sat heavily on the worn-out chair across from him. His hand hovered over the envelope, then withdrew. What if it says something I can't carry? You've been carrying it anyway, Jason said softly. Blake looked up. Their eyes met again, and for the first time since that stretch of desert years ago, Something old and brittle cracked open between them. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. He took a slow sip of the bitter coffee. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the old photo. He laid it on the table beside the envelope. Jason exhaled through his nose. I remember that day, right before rotation. Adam was giving Bobby hell for stealing his boots. Bobby always wore his 2 sizes too small, Blake muttered. Said it helped him run faster. I kept this all these years. Don't know why. Because you needed to, Jason said. Same reason I kept that truck running. We all held on in different ways. Blake stared at the envelope again. You know what's in there? He asked. No, Jason replied. But I remember how Adam looked when he handed it to me. Like it mattered. Like it would make something right. Blake reached for it, then stopped. You got a place I can sit a while? He asked. Jason nodded toward the cot. You can crash here. I don't rent it out. Blake stood, took the coffee and the envelope, and walked to the cot. He sat, turned the envelope over in his hands. It was sealed tight. The paper was old but unbroken. He could feel his name through the ink, feel the weight of it. Jason stayed in the office, gave him space. Blake didn't open it yet. He sat there in the dim light, boots planted on dusty linoleum, trying to remember a voice he hadn't heard in decades. A man he owed more than he ever said. A friend who might still be reaching out through a folded sheet of paper, or might be gone forever. Somewhere outside, a coyote cried in the distance. Inside, Blake closed his eyes and listened. The hum of the truck's idle was the only sound Blake Wilson could hear as he sat alone in the cab, parked just outside the fence line of Cooper's shop. The envelope rested on his thigh, opened now, its seal torn cleanly but with hesitation. The paper inside trembled slightly as he unfolded it, his fingers calloused and uncertain. He had waited until dark. Jason hadn't said a word when Blake stepped out, envelope in hand, nodding once before disappearing into the garage. Blake couldn't have read it under a roof, not with the weight it carried. He needed the cab, the place he'd lived more than anywhere else. The place where the road and silence made sense. The handwriting was unmistakably Adam's. Tight, angular strokes, the kind he'd used when scribbling orders or marking maps. But the first line was soft. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. Blake felt the bottom of his stomach fall. I don't know what they told you. Probably that I went missing, that I didn't make it. But the truth is, I made it out of the desert. Barely. Got medevaced with burns, shrapnel, a busted leg. They kept me at a military hospital in Germany for months. And in that time, I realized something I never said to you. Thank you. Blake blinked. That wasn't how he remembered it. The last thing he'd been told was that Adam had gone out on a solo recon and never returned. Missing in action, assumed dead. No body, no answers. But the letter continued. That mission, it was supposed to be yours. I pulled rank and volunteered instead. Told command you had a family. I didn't. I lied. I had a baby on the way. Didn't even tell you. She was born while I was under morphine and steel. But I figured you'd understand someday. That maybe this letter would help explain why I did what I did. Blake's heart pounded against his ribs. The memories came back in flashes. The briefing, the arguments, Adam insisting on going alone. Blake had been angry at the time, even relieved when he didn't have to risk another run. He never asked why. Just assumed Adam had something to prove. Jason was supposed to give you this if I didn't make it home. I tried to write more later, but my body gave out before my words could catch up. If you find her, her name is Rachel Flanders. Just tell her her father wasn't a ghost. Blake lowered the paper to his lap, breath shallow. The ink had smudged in places, water or tears or both. The letter ended without goodbye. Just that request. Just a name. Rachel. He leaned back, pressing the heels of his hands to his eyes. Adam had traded places with him. Adam had saved him. And no one knew. He sat like that for a long time, engine running low, headlights aimed at nothing. The empty road ahead shimmered faintly under the moonlight, like it was waiting. When he finally reached for his phone, his hand hovered over the contacts. He didn't want to call anyone. But he needed someone who still knew how to navigate the world outside Diesel and maps. And there was only one person left. He dialed. It rang once, twice, then a voice, cautious and tired. "Hello." He swallowed. "Kayla, it's your dad." Silence. "I need help with something," he said. "Now you call?" she said, voice flat. "After how many years?" Blake stared out the window. "I deserve that." "Yeah, you do." More silence. "I got a name," he said finally. "Rachel Flanders." Her dad. "Adam, he served with me. He saved my life. I owe him more than I ever said. I just found out he had a kid. And now I need to find her." Kayla sighed into the receiver. "And why me?" "Because you know how to do things I don't. Because you're better with people. With computers. With finding things. And because I trust you." He heard her exhale slowly. "I'm not a private investigator, Dad. I'm not asking you to be. Just help me do right by someone." There was a long pause and Blake could hear typing. He waited. "I've got a few hits. Rachel Flanders, California. One's in Bakersfield. Elementary school teacher. It seems she is married. Could be her. That far north, huh? I'll text you the address." "Thanks, Kayla." He almost hung up, but her voice stopped him. "Why now, Dad? Why this?" He looked down at the letter again. "Because I spent 20 years thinking the road was the only thing that made sense. But it turns out, I've been driving around something I should have faced a long time ago." Kayla didn't say anything for a moment. Then softly, "Mom always hoped you'd come back." Blake nodded to no one. "I didn't know how." Her voice was quiet. "Maybe now you do." He looked at the photo again, the one of the four of them in uniform, and at the envelope now creased from his grip. A past he'd buried was rising, not to haunt him, but to be heard. Outside, the night had cooled. He shut off the truck, stepped down onto the gravel, and looked up at the stars. "Hang tight, Adam," he murmured. "I'm gonna finish this." The school was set back from the street. A low, beige building with a chain-link fence around the playground and a mural of blooming desert flowers painted along one wall. The Bakersfield sun beat down on the lot as Blake and Jason sat quietly inside the blue pickup, parked in the far corner under the only bit of shade they could find. Jason adjusted the rearview mirror. "You sure about this?" Blake nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the entrance. "We didn't come all this way to turn around now." A few minutes later, a woman stepped out of the school doors. Early 30s, dark auburn hair tied back, loose blouse, sensible shoes, holding a stack of folders. She locked the main gate, then turned toward the lot. Her expression was calm, focused, until she noticed the two older men waiting by the truck. Jason stepped forward. "Rachel?" he asked gently. She hesitated, clutching the folders to her chest. "Yes, I'm Jason Cooper. This is Blake Wilson. We served with your father." Rachel froze. "My father?" Blake stepped closer, holding out the envelope. His voice was steady, but quiet. "Adam Flanders. He saved my life, and he asked Jason to give me this. He wrote it for me, before a mission he never came back from." Rachel's eyes dropped to the weathered envelope, the edges frayed, the ink faded but still clear. Her fingers trembled as she took it. "I was told he went missing," she said. "I's never leaving the paper. That he abandoned us. That he didn't want to be found." Jason's jaw tightened. "That's not what happened. He made it out badly wounded. He never stopped thinking of you." Blake added softly, "He volunteered to take a mission meant for me. He lied to command so I could live. And in the end, he wrote this, hoping it might make its way to you one day." Rachel looked up at them. "He knew about me?" Blake nodded. "Said you were born while he was recovering in Germany. He thought he'd get the chance to come home." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, she opened the letter. The sounds of the street dulled around them. Distant traffic, wind through the fence, a few kids laughing behind the school building. Rachel read slowly, her eyes scanning each word like it was written in fire. At one point, she touched the page like it might dissolve. Then her lips parted. "All this time," she whispered. "I thought he didn't want me. My mom never said much. I think she believed what the army told her." Jason looked down. "So did we. For a while." Rachel blinked, eyes wet. "I used to imagine what he'd be like. I gave up eventually. I had to." Blake reached into his pocket and pulled out the faded photograph. For soldiers, arms slung across each other's shoulders, half smiles, desert behind them. He wasn't perfect. None of us were. But he was brave. And he loved you. You deserve to know that. Rachel's fingers touched the photo. "This is him." Jason nodded. "Right before that final mission." She closed her eyes. "I don't know what to feel." Blake placed a hand on the side of the truck. "You don't have to decide today, but we're retracing his old route. One last time. If you'd like to come with us?" Rachel looked at them. Two men bound by silence, survival, and the kind of grief that never fully dissolves. She tucked the letter gently into her bag and said, "Let me grab my keys." They didn't rush the drive. Jason led in the blue pickup. Blake followed in his rig. Rachel came behind them in a small silver hybrid. No chatter on the CBs. Just the sound of tires rolling over long stretches of highway, mile after mile of arid hills and ghost towns and sky. They passed through places where only memory remained. Desert checkpoints, old bridges, service stations faded by sun and time. At a truck stop near Needles, they paused for pie and black coffee. Rachel brought out the letter again, carefully smoothing the creases. She asked them questions, small ones at first. Then stories followed. About Adam's humor, his stubbornness. Blake smiled at the memory. "He didn't talk much, but when he did, you listened." Jason added, "You have his eyes, you know." Rachel looked down, tears barely held back. "Thank you, both of you." At dusk, they reached mile marker 200. Jason pulled onto the shoulder. The truck rolled to a stop in the exact spot it had sat week after week. Blake parked behind, stepping out of his cab with a small wooden plaque wrapped in cloth. Rachel walked quietly beside him. They stood together at the edge of the road as the desert wind picked up, tugging at sleeves and hair. Blake stepped forward, holding a small wooden plaque he had made days earlier. Nothing fancy, just a sanded piece of cedar with a brass plate he'd screwed in himself at a rest stop, using the tools he kept in his rig. He didn't try to drive it into the rocky ground. Instead, he knelt by the guardrail, brushed aside loose gravel and weeds, and rested the plaque against a rusted post, wedging it carefully between two stones to keep it upright. It read, "Adam Flanders, Sergeant, Echo Platoon. He took the road for me." The wind settled. A quiet filled the space that felt like breath held too long finally being exhaled. Blake reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out the old photograph, worn at the edges. He set it gently at the base of the plaque and pressed a smooth, sun-warmed stone over one corner to keep it in place. Jason bowed his head and murmured a quiet prayer, words that carried more weight than volume. Rachel knelt beside them, one hand on the plaque, the other clutching the letter to her chest. They stayed like that for a while, not speaking, not needing to, as the sun dropped low over the highway they had all traveled, each carrying a different piece of the same story. They stood there until the sun dipped low, painting the cliffs behind them in fire and shadow. Later that night, Blake sat alone at a highway diner just off the 10, hands wrapped around a mug of cooling coffee. The window reflected the glow of passing headlights. A door opened behind him. "I figured you'd stop here," said a familiar voice. He turned. Kayla stood in the doorway, jacket slung over one shoulder, eyes tired but curious. "I saw your location ping. Figured I'd find you doing the most dramatic version of closure possible." He smiled. "Not dramatic, just overdue." She slid into the booth across from him. They didn't speak right away. Then her eyes fell on the photo on the table. "This the guy?" Blake nodded. "And that's you." He tapped the corner. "All of us, back then." Kayla traced the image with her gaze. "You look different. Less gray," he said. "More stupid." She smiled softly. After a moment, she added, "I'm not promising anything, But I'd like to hear the whole story sometime. Blake lifted his mug. Deal. This story reminds us that some debts can't be paid in money, only in truth and in time. What would you do if a letter changed everything you believed about the past? Comment below, and if this journey moved you, give it a like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more powerful stories like this. See you in the next video.